What is going on, guys? It is Joe, and welcome back to a brand new installment of The Breakfast Club. Those of you that don't know what The Breakfast Club is, this is a series on my channel in which I superset between full day of eating vlogs, workout videos, all that good stuff, and a series called The Breakfast Club. Now, The Breakfast Club is basically a mini Q&A in which subscribers, viewers will leave questions in the comment section down below, and then I will then answer them. Or they'll message me on Instagram at just_Garcia17. Make sure before submitting your question, you also follow me there. Most important thing is following me there. And we basically sit down, eat breakfast, and answer some questions. Now, we have been known to eat some wacky things for breakfast. We've had cheesecake, we've had cookies, we've had pancakes, we've had French toast. We've had some peak week breakfast installments where it's just plain ass egg whites. Now today for breakfast, even though it's not breakfast, it's technically 10:50 p.m., but this video is going live at 8 a.m., so you can be eating breakfast while watching this video. However, I'm going to be eating last meal before bed, and that is going to be a wrap. Only thing that I am wrapping up tonight is this right here. We have some turkey deli meat, one slice of cheese, some baby spinach, romaine lettuce, and some light mayo, sriracha, and mustard in this guy right here. I feel like in any situation where there's food on my channel, I have to taste test it for the camera. Like, there's no way you can't do that, right? As Jesse James West would say, last bite, best bite, baby. Man, it feels good to be able to finally eat some actual food on Breakfast Club. For those of you that have been following the channel, you guys have been watching me go through my prep series as well. And we actually just came off of our second show. And I will have a full show day recap video going live tomorrow, so make sure you stay tuned for that. However, let's go ahead and get right into some questions. Okay, so question number one. Have you ever struggled with binge eating or any other eating disorder, and how did you overcome it? This is a little bit of a tricky question because I personally have never struggled with an actual binge eating disorder. Now, have there been times in my fitness journey where I have completely binged out and like completely just went off the rails and had a cheat day? Yeah, I think everybody has been there. Now, I think the point where it becomes sort of like a eating disorder is when it becomes a continuous habit. Now, however, even though I personally have never struggled with an actual binge eating disorder, I have binged out in the past and have gone, on a crazy cheat day. I mean, I have filmed multiple 10,000 calorie challenges, so I mean, that tells you something, right? However, I have had clients where they have went on crazy binges and have needed help with nutrition, a little bit of guidance, figuring out an approach to nutrition that is sustainable. When it comes to binge eating, you really have to kind of ask yourself, what causes you to binge eat? I think we all have those foods that once we get a hold of them, that's like our trigger food. Once we taste the yummy goodness of that food, it's just a downward spiral. You kind of just black out, and next thing you know, you just consumed like 5,000 calories in one sitting. For me personally, that is chips. Every time I even say I'm gonna have one chip and I'll be done, I do not have the self-control to only eat one chip. First it's one chip, then it's two, then it's three, then I find myself walking away from the bag, then I find myself walking back to the bag, consuming the entire bag, looking down and being like, what the hell? Number one, first tip, get those trigger foods out of the house entirely. If they're not in the house, you can't binge on them. You're less likely to go binge on something if you have to physically get in your car, drive to the grocery store, and go get that item. And if you're willing to go through those lengths to actually get the item to go binge on in that moment, well then I think you need some actual help. Number one, get those items out of the house. Number two is actually replace the binge eating items with lower calorie options that have the same effect. So what I mean by that, so for me personally, chips is a big trigger food. The thing I replace chips with is Smart Pop popcorn. A lot lower in calorie. It's a very similar act of motion of consistently putting something salty into my mouth hole that allows me to stay away from the chips and focus more on the popcorn. So number one is get the trigger foods out of the house. Number two is replace the trigger foods with alternatives that are lower in calories. And then number three, I would look at your entire day of nutrition as a whole. I think binge eating also comes a lot from just living in the extremes. What I mean by that, binge eating can come from people that are trying to bulk and trying to force feed themselves. And if they're consistently doing that to the point where they're force feeding themselves beyond their level of fullness, that right there, it can cause a binge eating disorder. Where every time they go to eat, they have to basically feel stuffed out of their minds. They can never feel satisfied. The other thing too is when you're dieting way too hard, when you're way too restrictive on your overall meal plan to the point where it causes you to binge, it's too unsustainable too restrictive to the point where you basically snap and you go on a freaking tear. You have to live somewhere in the middle where you're not restricted on your overall food intake and you're also not going too crazy overboard when it comes to actual eating and trying to feel full. The key is to just be somewhere in that middle, feeling satisfied that the entire day, not feeling like you're restricted on your diet and you can enjoy the foods that you love. That comes from just finding lower calorie alternatives. And my last piece of advice for that is just patience and practice. It's very hard to take one lifestyle of living and completely do a 180 and be on the other side. Take small steps every day to make those changes and put your foot in the right direction. Start by getting rid of the trigger foods. Then, once you do that, introduce the alternatives. And next thing you know, you're just practicing healthy habits over and over again to the point where you're kind of breaking that cycle of binge eating. Even though I personally never really have truly struggled with binge eating, those are my tips and advices that have actually kept me from binge eating myself. Okay, so next question is, hey man, any advice on mentally doing a bulk after this perpetual cut? Yeah, so here's my advice on people that are basically gonna transition to a bulk after a cut. Now, there are only a small percentage of people that I advise to actually go on a bulk after cutting. If you just dieted for a bodybuilding show where you essentially dieted down to essential levels of fat, like unhealthy levels of fat that is unsustainable, is your time to actually bulk. That's your time to actually be able to gain weight, gain some fat to a healthy level of body fat. Or for those that are already super lean, that's just like your genetics, that's how you were basically born, and you want to just gain weight to a healthier body fat, to the point where you're able to just gain a little bit more lean muscle tissue. It's actually very interesting because Greg Doucette and Dr. Mike actually recently did a video together talking about the ideal body fat percentage to be in to actually gain lean muscle tissue. Now I'm gonna link that video down below for those that are like wondering what is the most ideal level of fat to have to gain lean muscle tissue. Basically, in a nutshell, to sum it up, the ideal level of body fat percentage in terms of males is between like 10 and 20%. And Dr. Mike actually brought up a really good point. People that were sub 10% body fat, when they actually climbed up to 10% body fat, the result of them actually building muscle was very insignificant on that climb up. It's actually when they were above 10% and held that, where they were actually able to see a lot more lean muscle tissue growth, was when they're actually holding above 10% body fat, because their body was able to actually now really focus on building muscle because it was no longer in that period of like starvation because you were too lean. So if you're already too lean, then yes, that's your time to transition to a bulk. Now the mental part of it, I completely understand. Put yourself in one area, the one extreme of being very lean and having just striations and cuts and you look just ridiculous. And some people really like that look. However, for some people, it's not sustainable to be that lean year round. And to now all of a sudden be okay with yourself gaining more body fat, a little bit of a mental game, trying to be okay with you adding on more fat. I remember even after my first show, seeing myself like completely dehydrated, bone dry, like shredded, and seeing myself like 3 days later after I've had like more food and water back into my system. It was like a total like mind game. Looking like, damn, am I like fat right now? Am I too fat to do my second show? And not that I wasn't too fat, it was just I had more water, a little bit more fluff, and I would have to take that off. But seeing yourself extremely shredded versus like not so shredded, but better than like, you know, majority of the people out there, and people will actually like kill to have your physique when you're not crazy shredded, but just in a healthier body fat percentage. It does still play a little bit of a mental game with yourself because you're so used to seeing yourself to one extreme. The mental part of it is just being okay with being in a healthier body fat percentage. Yeah, you may not look stupid shredded, so not on the other end of the spectrum of completely unhealthy, like carrying too much fat. The most ideal place is to live somewhere in that middle at a body fat that is lean enough that you're happy with, that you can still function, have energy, and still continue to build muscle. So even though mentally you might psych yourself out thinking like, oh my goodness, I'm like too fat right now, even though you're completely not, mentally reassure yourself and know that you are actually healthier at like a higher body fat percentage than to be like single digit all the time. That's like my piece of advice for you. Anyways, I hope those answer you guys' questions in a way that can be somewhat just helpful. I may not have all the correct answers to all these questions, but I try and give my best 2 cents that can be beneficial in some way, shape, or form. If you guys have any questions at all for the next Breakfast Club episode, go ahead and leave in the comments down below or DM me on Instagram at Joseph_Garcia17. I am wrapping the video up here. Please leave a like if you guys enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new. It's been your boy Joe. Peace.